The silver chains cut into Lyra Vale's wrists, hard enough to draw blood, and the royal court leaned forward to watch. Not because they pitied her, because they wanted proof. Proof that the prince's unwanted bride truly carried nothing alive inside her. The moon trial chamber stood open beneath the winter sky, carved directly into the heart of the mountain beneath Castle Winterfang. Ancient stone pillars circled the arena, like the ribs of a dead god, their surfaces engraved with the names of every Alpha bloodline that had ruled the northern kingdoms for the last 1,000 years. Moonlight poured through the broken ceiling overhead, turning the black marble floor pale silver. Cold wind swept through the chamber. Torches hissed, and somewhere beyond the walls, wolves began to howl. Lyra stood alone at the center of the circle, in a torn white ceremonial gown that still carried traces of her wedding embroidery. The silver around her wrists burned hotter with every passing second. The chains were enchanted. They reacted to wolves, or to the absence of them. The nobles gathered along the upper balconies watched her with expressions sharpened by curiosity, contempt, fear, and anticipation. Some had traveled from rival kingdoms only to witness this moment. The dead wolf bride, the prince's humiliation, the girl who had survived 21 years without ever shifting once. At the highest balcony, beneath the black banners of House Draven, Prince Kael stood motionless beside the throne platform. His face revealed nothing, but his wolf was screaming. Lyra could feel it even from across the chamber. Not with sound, with pressure, with heat beneath her skin, with a terrible sensation that something dangerous inside him kept trying to break free every time his eyes landed on her. The High Priestess Mera stepped forward in robes white as fresh snow, her iron-gray hair braided with silver rings bearing the symbols of the old moon temple. Her voice echoed across the chamber. "Lyra Vale," she declared, "daughter of House Vale, accused carrier of corrupted blood and dormant spirit. Under the eyes of the moon, reveal the wolf within you." The silver chains tightened instantly. Pain exploded through Lyra's body. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She dropped to one knee as fire tore beneath her skin. Still, nothing happened. No claws. No fur. No glowing eyes. Only silence. The silence they had mocked her for since childhood. Somewhere above her, a noblewoman laughed quietly. Another whispered, "There truly is nothing inside her." Lyra closed her eyes, not because the pain frightened her, because humiliation no longer surprised her. She had lived inside humiliation for most of her life. The first time people looked at her differently, she had only been 6 years old. She still remembered the snow falling outside the healer's hall, while her father stood rigid beside the elder wolves, waiting for her first shift. All wolf children shifted eventually. Some at 5, some at 7, rarely later than that. It was considered the first sacred moment of a wolf's life. Families celebrated it with feasts and silver ribbons tied around the child's wrists. But Lyra remembered only silence. Hours passed. Nothing happened. The elders exchanged glances. Her father's face slowly emptied of hope, and finally the oldest healer knelt before her and pressed 2 fingers against her chest. "She survives," the healer whispered carefully. "But the wolf does not." Her father had gone completely still, as if something inside him died too. After that day, no one struck Lyra openly. Winterfang was too noble for crude cruelty. Instead, they erased her slowly. Children stopped inviting her to training rituals. Noble families stopped speaking of possible matches. At feasts, servants accidentally forgot her chair. At festivals, mothers quietly pulled their children away when Lyra approached. Not because they hated her, because they feared her. A dead wolf inside a living body was an omen older than the kingdom itself. Something unfinished. Something wrong. Her father never looked directly at her again after her 10th winter. And by 16, even servants had started whispering that perhaps the moon goddess herself had abandoned her before birth. Yet despite all of it, Lyra never begged for acceptance. That was what unsettled people most. She endured quietly, like winter stone enduring snow. The chamber blurred, as another pulse of agony ripped through the silver chains around her wrists. Mara's cold voice echoed again. Shift. The command carried temple magic. It struck directly into Lyra's blood. The crowd leaned forward eagerly. Still, nothing happened. Prince Kyle's jaw tightened. From the upper balcony, his golden eyes locked onto her with an expression dangerously close to panic. And that frightened Lyra more than the chains. Because Kale Draven never panicked. Not even during battle. Not even during assassination attempts. Not even the night before their wedding, when 3 rival kingdoms threatened civil war. If he refused the marriage alliance, the Wolf Prince feared almost nothing, except whatever he saw when he looked at her. A memory rose suddenly through the pain. The first night she met him. Snowstorm, black horses, a courtyard full of kneeling soldiers, and Kale, stepping down from his war mount beneath torchlight like a king born from shadow. Every servant in Castlevale had lowered their eyes instantly. Every wolf bowed instinctively. Even the air changed around him. Kale carried dominance the way storms carried thunder. Effortlessly, terribly. But when his gaze found Lyra, standing silently beneath the archway, his expression had changed. Not desire, not attraction. Recognition. Pure alarm, hidden beneath control. As if he had spent years searching for something he prayed never to find. The memory shattered, as Mara suddenly lifted the ceremonial blade. Silver symbols ignited along its edge. The moon reveals all hidden corruption, the priestess said softly. Then she cut Lyra's palm. Blood splashed across the moonstone floor, and the world stopped breathing. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then every torch in the chamber turned white. Not yellow, not silver. White. The flames stretched unnaturally high, as icy wind exploded through the arena. Wolves across the balconies whimpered violently. Several nobles staggered backward. The stone beneath Lyra's feet began glowing. Ancient symbols lit beneath the floor, one after another like awakening stars. Mara's calm expression cracked. No, she whispered. Something moved beneath Lyra's ribs. Not dead. Sleeping. A howl echoed through the chamber. Not from outside. From inside her. The chains exploded. Silver fragments blasted outward in a storm of light. The force threw guards backward across the floor. Gasps became screams. Lyra rose slowly to her feet, as white fire spiraled around her body like moonlit smoke. Pain vanished. Cold vanished. And for the first time in her entire life, she felt her wolf awaken. Not small. Not weak. Ancien. Massive. Terrible. The floor beneath her cracked. Moonlight flooded the chamber. And behind Lyra, the spirit of an enormous white wolf slowly emerged from the silver flames. The creature towered over every warrior in the arena. Its fur glowed like fresh snow beneath moonlight. Its eyes burned pale silver. And when it looked toward the royal balconies, every alpha in the chamber dropped to one knee, including Prince Kale. The entire court fell into horrified silence, because extinct wolves were not supposed to return, and the White Luna bloodline had been dead for over 400 years. Or at least, that was what the kingdom had been told. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The white wolf, standing behind Lyra, radiated a pressure so ancient that even the war banners hanging from the pillars trembled violently in the cold wind pouring through the shattered ceiling. Several noble wolves collapsed entirely, whining against the floor as instinct forced them into submission. The impossible had happened. Not merely a shift. Not merely hidden power. A bloodline the kingdoms had buried in legend had awakened in the center of the moon trial itself. And the court had witnessed it. Lyra stared at the glowing reflection trembling across the moonstone floor beneath her bare feet. For 21 years she had lived with silence inside her ribs. 21 years of wondering whether she truly was empty, broken, cursed. Now, the power roaring through her body felt so vast it frightened even her. The white wolf lowered its enormous head beside her shoulder. Not like a beast, like a guardian, like a queen kneeling before another queen. High Priestess Myra stumbled backward, horror draining the color from her face. "Seal the chamber," she ordered sharply. "Now." But the guards hesitated, because Prince Kael had finally moved. He descended the throne steps slowly, each footstep echoing across the stunned silence of the chamber. His black ceremonial coat billowed behind him like living shadow, silver clasps glinting against the dark fabric. The closer he came to Lyra, the more unstable the air became around him. His wolf was reacting, violently. The shadows beneath the marble floor twisted unnaturally. Cracks spread across nearby pillars. One torch exploded outright. Yet Kael never took his eyes off Lyra, not the wolf behind her. Here, as if he had forgotten the entire court existed. "Kael," Mara warned, recovering enough composure to harden her voice. "Do not approach her." He ignored her. That frightened the court almost as much as Lyra's transformation, because Kael Draven obeyed no one openly, except the old moon temple in matters involving prophecy. And for the first time in years, the prince appeared ready to break that obedience. "You knew," Lyra whispered. Her own voice startled her. It sounded different now, deeper, layered faintly with another presence beneath it. Kael stopped several feet away. Pain flashed across his face. Not surprise. Guilt. "Yes," he admitted quietly. Murmurs exploded across the balconies. Lyra's pulse hammered painfully. All at once, pieces began fitting together. His coldness, the rejection during the wedding, the strange warnings, the way he looked at her like someone standing too close to wildfire. "You knew what I was," she said. "I suspected, and you let them humiliate me anyway." The accusation struck harder than any blade. Kael's jaw tightened. "You were alive." The answer stunned her into silence. The prince looked exhausted suddenly. Not physically. Soul-deep exhausted, like a man who had spent too many years carrying impossible choices alone. "You think I rejected you because I despised you?" he asked quietly. "Lyra, if the court had known the White Luna bloodline survived." He looked toward the nobles surrounding them, toward the rival Alphas, toward the terrified council members, already whispering to one another. "They would have torn you apart before sunrise." Mara stepped forward sharply. "Enough." Her temple robes whipped violently in the wind pouring through the chamber. "The prophecy cannot be allowed to awaken fully," she declared. "Seize the girl." No one moved. Even the guards looked uncertain now, because the white wolf had raised its head, and every instinct in the room screamed that attacking Lyra would be a fatal mistake. The creature's pale silver eyes shifted toward Myra. The priestess visibly froze. Then the wolf growled. The sound was low, soft, but the entire chamber shook. Cracks splintered across the moonstone floor. Several nobles cried out. One guard outright dropped his spear and fled toward the exits. Lyra felt the creature's emotions pulse through her body. Not rage, protection. The realization nearly shattered her composure. All her life she had believed herself abandoned by the moon goddess. Empty, dead inside. But the wolf had never been dead. It had been waiting for something strong enough to wake it. Kael suddenly staggered. A harsh sound escaped his throat as he braced one hand against a pillar. The court gasped again. Dark veins spread briefly across the prince's throat before disappearing beneath his collar. Lyra stirred. "What's wrong with him?" she whispered. No one answered, but Mara's expression tightened sharply, and Kael looked furious that she had seen it. "I'm fine," he said coldly. It was an obvious lie. The white wolf behind Lyra snarled softly. Not at the court, at Kael, as if recognizing something wounded inside him. The prince's breathing grew uneven. Then suddenly, a massive shadow erupted behind him. Several nobles screamed. A black wolf spirit manifested briefly in the air above Kael's shoulders, enormous and terrifying, formed from darkness and silver smoke. But unlike Lyra's wolf, this one was dying. Its ribs showed beneath ragged fur. Dark cracks spread through its body like poisoned fractures. One glowing golden eye remained sharp and furious while the other had dimmed nearly black. The chamber fell into stunned silence. No one had ever seen the prince's wolf fully before, and now the court understood why. Kale's wolf was cursed. The shadow beast snarled violently toward the white wolf. Not with hatred, with desperation. The two ancient creatures stared at one another across the shattered moon trial chamber, while tension thickened the air so heavily it became difficult to breathe. Lyra's heart pounded. The white wolf stepped closer to Kale. The black wolf lowered its head slightly. Then, impossibly, it whimpered. The sound tore through the chamber like a blade. Prince Kale flinched visibly, shame flashing across his face. And in that moment, Lyra understood something terrifying. The prince had not rejected her because he feared her power. He rejected her because his own wolf was already dying. The realization struck hard enough to momentarily drown out the chaos around them. All those cold looks, the distance, the restraint, the refusal to touch her for longer than necessary. Not cruelty, fear. Not fear of her, fear of himself. Mara recovered first. The White Luna cannot bond with a corrupted Alpha, she declared sharply. The prophecy was clear. If the union completes, the northern kingdoms will fall into war. Kale's eyes turned lethal. The kingdoms are already at war. You would doom them faster. I would save my mate. The words hit the chamber like thunder. Mate. The court erupted instantly. Rival nobles shouted over one another. Guards gripped weapons uncertainly. Several council members began demanding immediate execution, while others stared at Lyra with naked terror. Because if Kale publicly acknowledged the bond now, the White Luna prophecy became real, and every balance of power across the north would shatter overnight. Lyra's pulse thundered painfully. Mate. The word echoed inside her chest. Kale looked as if he regretted saying it aloud the moment it left his mouth. But it was too late. The entire court had heard. And worse, so had the wolves. Howls exploded outside the castle walls. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. The sound rolled through the mountain fortress like an avalanche. Every wolf across Winterfang had felt the awakening. The old bloodline had returned, and the kingdom would never be the same again. Mara's expression hardened with sudden resolve. Kill the wolf, she ordered. Everything stopped. Even Kyle froze. The priestess pointed directly at Lyra. Before the bond completes. The guards hesitated only briefly this time. Then silver spears rose toward her from every side of the chamber. The white wolf bared its massive glowing teeth. Kale moved instantly. Stand down. His command cracked through the arena with alpha force powerful enough to shake the pillars themselves. Several guards dropped to one knee automatically. But not all of them. Because Mara had prepared for this. Temple warriors emerged from the upper corridors wearing silver ceremonial armor, etched with anti-shifter runes. Unlike ordinary guards, these men answered the Moon Temple before the throne, and every spear they carried was forged specifically to kill ancient wolves. Lyra's stomach dropped. This had never been a trial. It had been an execution from the beginning. Kyle realized it too. His face turned terrifyingly still. You planned this, he said softly. Mara met his gaze without fear. I planned for the survival of the kingdom. You poisoned my wolf. The accusation slammed through the chamber. Several council members looked horrified. Myra's silence confirmed everything. Kyle's black wolf exploded outward in fury. Darkness surged through the chamber like living smoke. The prince's control snapped visibly as claws burst briefly from his hands, and his golden eyes turned almost completely black. For the first time since arriving at Winterfang, Prince Kale looked monstrous, and beautiful, and utterly lethal. You condemned my father, Kale growled. You weakened me for years. You turned the kingdom against her before she even awakened. Mara's expression wavered for the first time. Your father chose duty. My father died coughing blood onto temple floors while you called it divine will. The chamber trembled violently. Lyra stared at him in shock. No one had ever spoken to the high priestess that way. No one survived doing it. But Kale no longer looked like a prince trying to preserve peace. He looked like a wolf who had finally found the thing he was willing to destroy kingdoms for. And somehow, That realization frightened Lyra more than the white wolf standing behind her, because part of her wanted to step toward him, not away. The chamber stood on the edge of war. Temple guards tightened their grip on silver spears, while royal soldiers instinctively shifted closer toward Prince Kael, despite the danger radiating from his unstable wolf. Rival alphas watched from the balconies with calculating eyes, already measuring how quickly the northern kingdoms might collapse if Winterfang fractured tonight. And at the center of it all stood Lyra, barefoot, blading, wrapped in white fire beneath the shadow of an ancient wolf spirit no one believed still existed. For years, she had survived by becoming smaller, quieter, invisible. Now, the entire kingdom stared at her like the moon itself had descended into the court. The attention felt unbearable. Kael's black wolf snarled again behind him, shadows spilling violently across the chamber floor. The creature's form flickered erratically, as though the curse poisoning it could no longer remain hidden beneath restraint. Mara saw the instability instantly, and smiled, not with triumph, with grim certainty. "You see now," the priestess declared loudly to the court. "The prophecy was never salvation. The White Luna awakens destruction. Already the prince loses control." Kael's golden eyes snapped toward her with murder inside them. But before he could move, Lyra stepped forward. The white wolf followed immediately. Every spear in the chamber jerked upward toward her. Kael's voice cracked like thunder. "Do not touch her." The force behind the command shook the pillars hard enough for dust to rain from the ceiling. Several guards physically recoiled. Yet Lyra barely hurt him, because she was staring at Mara, at the woman who had orchestrated years of fear around her existence. And suddenly, Lyra understood something important. The priestess truly believed she was protecting the kingdom. That was what made her dangerous. Not cruelty. Conviction. "You poisoned him slowly," Lyra said quietly. Mara lifted her chin. "I restrained what would have become catastrophe. You turned his own court against him. I kept the throne alive. You made him suffer alone." The priestess's expression finally sharpened. Better one cursed prince than 10,000 dead wolves. Silence crashed through the chamber. Kael went deathly still. The white wolf behind Lyra growled low in her chest. And this time Lyra realized the sound had come from both of them. The bond between girl and beast was strengthening rapidly. Dangerously rapidly. Kael saw it too. Fear flashed across his face. Not fear of her power. Fear of what the power might cost her. "Lyra," he said carefully, stepping closer. "You need to leave the chamber." A bitter laugh almost escaped her. Leave? After spending her entire life, being hidden away, whenever powerful people became uncomfortable? "No," she answered softly. The single word stunned him, because it was the first time she had openly defied him in front of the court. Kael's jaw tightened. The white wolf shifted protectively beside her, towering over everyone in the arena. And then something unexpected happened. The great beast lowered its head toward Kael, not threatening, observing. The prince froze. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped closer. The black wolf behind him emerged further from shadow, enormous and skeletal beneath the curse scars splitting across its body. The two wolves faced one another, white and black, moonlight and darkness, ancient power and dying fury. The chamber became so silent, even breathing sounded loud. Then Lyra felt it. A pulse, not from herself, from Kael. Pain, unimaginable pain. It flooded through the bond suddenly, sharp enough to make her gasp. Memories crashed through her mind, in fragments she knew were not her own. Kael, kneeling alone in snow, while blood stained the ice beneath him. Temple healers forcing silver poison down his throat, under the guise of sacred ritual. A younger Kael begging his father not to let the priests continue. The former king whispering through tears, "If the prophecy awakens, they will kill your mate before you ever meet her." Lyra staggered. Kael caught her instantly. The moment his hands touched her arms, the chamber erupted with silver light. Gasps exploded across the balconies. Because mates touching during prophecy awakening rituals was forbidden for one reason: The bond completed itself faster than either wolf could control. KL cursed under his breath as power slammed through both of them violently. His wolf roared in agony. The white wolf beside Lyra surged forward, glowing brighter. And suddenly, Lyra understood everything. The dying wolf, the rejection, the distance, the coldness. KL had spent years trying to survive a prophecy designed to destroy both of them. His eyes locked onto hers. "Run," he whispered. The word hit harder than any command. Temple guards moved instantly. Silver chains flew through the air toward Lyra. KL reacted before thought. Darkness exploded outward from his body. The prince shifted partially mid-motion, claws tearing through gloves as his wolf finally broke restraint entirely. Black shadows engulfed the chamber, while his monstrous wolf form lunged between Lyra and the incoming chains. The impact shattered stone. Screams erupted. The force threw several guards backward across the arena, but KL's wolf staggered immediately afterward. The curse spreading through it pulsed violently now, black fractures crawling across fur and bone. Lyra's heart dropped. The poison was killing him faster, and the bond was accelerating it. Lyra raised both hands sharply. Temple runes ignited across the chamber walls. "You see?" she shouted over the chaos. "The prophecy destroys everything it touches." The moonstone floor cracked violently. Then the chamber began to shake. At first, Lyra thought it was Kale's power losing control. But the white wolf suddenly snarled toward the altar beneath the throne platform. Something else was waking. Something ancient. Mara's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. "No," the priestess whispered. A deep cracking sound echoed beneath the arena floor. The nobles backed away from the balconies in panic. Another crack split the moonstone. Then another. Black smoke began pouring upward from beneath the ancient altar. Cold swept through the chamber, so violently frost spread instantly across the stone pillars. Kaya looked toward the altar and swore. "What is that?" Lyra asked. But deep down, she already knew. The white wolf beside her had become completely still, not with confusion, recognition. Myra's voice trembled for the first time in years. The eclipse beast. The entire chamber froze. Even rival alphas looked horrified. Every child in the northern kingdoms knew the legend. When the ancient wolf wars nearly destroyed the continent centuries ago, the old moon temple created a beast forged from darkness itself to slaughter forbidden bloodlines. A creature designed specifically to kill White Luna descendants. And somehow, the temple had hidden it beneath Winterfang all this time. The altar exploded. Black stone shattered across the chamber. A massive claw erupted upward through the floor. Women screamed. Temple guards stumbled backward in terror. The creature rose slowly from the darkness beneath the mountain, vast, skeletal, wrapped in black smoke and silver scars, with burning hollow eyes and rows of monstrous teeth. The eclipse beast, even Kale's wolf, instinctively stepped backward. The thing smelled like death. Old death. Ancient slaughter. Its gaze fixed immediately onto Lyra, and smiled. Not with joy, with hunger. The white wolf beside her bared its teeth. Kale moved in front of Lyra instantly, despite barely remaining upright. "You have to leave now. What about you?" "I'll hold it." The answer terrified her, because he knew he could not win. The curse poisoning his wolf had already weakened him too badly. This would kill him. The realization struck so hard it physically hurt. Kale glanced back at her briefly, and for the first time since meeting him, his mask finally broke completely. No prince. No cold alpha. No political control. Only a man terrified of losing someone he had barely allowed himself to touch. "Please," he whispered. The word nearly destroyed her. Then the eclipse beast attacked. The creature lunged across the chamber with terrifying speed, black claws ripping through stone as it charged directly toward Lyra. Kale shifted fully. Darkness exploded across the arena as his massive black wolf collided with the beast midair. The impact shattered pillars. The entire chamber shook violently. Nobles fled screaming toward exits, while guards desperately tried to hold collapsing balconies together. Lyra stumbled backward as monstrous wolves tore into each other beneath storms of silver fire and black smoke. Kale's wolf fought savagely despite the curse breaking through its body. Blood splattered across the moonstone. Dark blood. His blood. And suddenly Lyra understood something terrible. If Kale died now, the White Luna would awaken alone. Exactly as the prophecy intended. The white wolf beside her turned toward her slowly. Their eyes met, and for the first time, Lyra heard the wolf speak, not with words, with feeling, choice. The wolf was asking permission to fully awaken, to merge completely. The power flooding through their bond frightened her, because she knew instinctively what would happen afterward. There would be no returning to the quiet, invisible girl she once was. No more hiding, no more surviving silently. The entire world would know her name after tonight. Kale roared in pain across the chamber as the Eclipse Beast slammed him through a pillar hard enough to crack the stone wall behind him. The black wolf struggled to rise, the curse spreading rapidly now. He was losing. Lyra closed her eyes. Then finally, she stopped, being afraid of herself. When her eyes opened again, they glowed pure silver. The white wolf behind her rose onto its full massive height, and the moon itself answered her call. Moonlight crashed through the broken ceiling like a living river. Not ordinary light, ancient light, the kind buried in old prophecies and forbidden prayers. The entire chamber turned silver white as frost exploded across the walls, and every wolf in Winterfang began howling at once. The sound rolled through the mountain fortress so violently that servants collapsed to their knees in distant corridors. Lyra stepped forward. The white wolf moved with her. No, the white wolf moved as her. Their souls had begun merging completely. Silver symbols ignited across Lyra's skin beneath the torn fabric of her gown, ancient markings winding around her arms like living moonfire. Her hair lifted in the wind pouring through the chamber while power surged beneath her ribs so fiercely it almost hurt. The Eclipse Beast stopped fighting Kyle. Slowly, the monstrous creature turned toward her. Its hollow black eyes widened. Recognition. Fear. For centuries the beast had hunted White Luna blood. But this was the first true awakening it had witnessed since the old wolf wars. Kyle staggered upright across the ruined chamber, blood running from the corner of his mouth as his black wolf struggled to remain standing beside him. Lyra, he breathed. There was terror in his voice now, not because of the beast, because of what awakening completely might do to her. The white wolf inside her felt it instantly. The deeper the bond became, the less human she would remain. That was the hidden truth behind the old bloodline. The White Lunas were not simply rulers. They became vessels, half spirit, half wolf, bound forever. Between worlds. Mara's horrified voice echoed through the chamber. She must stop now. No one listened. The priestess stumbled forward desperately, temple robes dragging through blood and shattered stone. You don't understand what she's becoming. Lyra looked at her calmly, and suddenly saw the truth buried beneath all the fear. Not hatred, regret. Mara had witnessed this once before. Another White Luna. Another kingdom consumed by war. The realization hit hard. You watched one die, Lyra whispered. The priestess froze. Pain flickered across her face. Years of rigid control cracked open for a single moment. She begged the kingdoms to unite. Mara whispered hoarsely. They burned her alive instead. The chamber fell silent, except for the growling of the Eclipse Beast. Mara's eyes filled with old grief. I was young, she said quietly. I watched them tear the world apart over her power. Kings slaughtered children to possess her bloodline. Wolves devoured entire cities in the moon riots. By the end, the rivers carried more bodies than water. Her gaze locked onto Lyra. So I swore the White Luna would never rise again. The confession hit the chamber like falling stone. Not evil. Fear weaponized into cruelty. Kale slowly pushed himself upright, black shadows curling violently around him as his wolf struggled to heal from wounds that refused to close. You became the very monster you feared, he said coldly. Mara looked shattered suddenly. Old. Tyrants are rarely born believing they are villains, Lyra said softly. The priestess stared at her in silence. Then the eclipse beast roared. The sound ripped through the chamber hard enough to shatter nearby windows. The creature lunged toward Lyra again. But this time, she did not retreat. Silver fire exploded outward from her body. The white wolf surged forward with impossible speed, colliding against the eclipse beast so violently the impact split the moonstone floor from one end of the chamber to the other. The entire fortress shook. Outside, towers cracked. Snow cascaded from rooftops. The two ancient creatures tore into one another beneath storms of moonlight and darkness, while nobles fled through collapsing corridors. Lyra felt everything. The beast's hunger, its endless rage, its centuries of imprisonment beneath the temple, and beneath all of it, pain. The eclipse beast had not been born evil either. It had been created, forged from sacrificed wolves during the ancient wars, bound into endless torment beneath Winterfang, a weapon that had suffered for centuries. The realization nearly broke her concentration. The white wolf sensed her hesitation instantly. Danger. The beast slammed into her with crushing force, throwing her backward across shattered stone. Pain exploded through her shoulder as she crashed against a fallen pillar. Kyle roared. The black wolf attacked savagely, darkness tearing across the chamber as he forced the creature away from Lyra, despite his failing strength. But the curse inside him was spreading rapidly now. Black fractures split across his wolf's body. His movements slowed. The eclipse beast struck him hard enough to send him skidding across blood-covered marble. Lyra's heart stopped. Kyle. He tried to stand, collapsed, tried again, collapsed harder. The entire chamber watched their prince slowly dying, and Kyle, still, looked only at her, not the beast, not the court. Here, as if making certain she survived mattered more than breathing. Something inside Lyra broke open completely. Not rage, not vengeance. Love, terrible, unavoidable, earned through pain and restraint and sacrifice. And all the moments he almost chose her before fear dragged him back. The bond between them ignited fully. Silver light exploded through the chamber. Kyle gasped sharply as the mating bond finally completed itself. Every wolf in Winterfang howled simultaneously. The force of it nearly brought the castle down. The black curse poisoning Kale's wolf surged violently in resistance, dark veins spreading across his throat as agony ripped through him. Lyra saw the poison clearly now. Not physical. Soul deep. Temple magic woven into his blood for years, slowly killing him to keep the prophecy dormant. The white wolf stepped beside KL protectively, then turned toward Lyra. Choice again. Not command. Never command. The White Luna's true power was not domination. It was unity. Lyra understood suddenly. The ancient bloodline had never been feared because it was strongest. It was feared because wolves obeyed it willingly. She stepped toward the eclipse beast slowly. The creature snarled weakly now, wounded from battle yet still enormous enough to destroy the chamber. Its hollow eyes fixed on her cautiously. Everyone expected her to kill it. Instead, Lyra knelt. The court froze in disbelief. Even Kale stared at her. The white wolf lowered its massive head beside her shoulder. Lyra looked directly into the monster's burning eyes. "You were made from suffering," she whispered. The beast trembled. "You were chained." Another tremor. "And now you only know hunger because no one ever offered you anything else." Silence spread through the ruined chamber. The eclipse beast slowly stopped growling. Moonlight touched its scarred black fur. And for the first time in centuries, the creature looked tired. Tears burned unexpectedly behind Lyra's eyes, because she understood. Being treated like a curse long enough eventually taught even gentle things to become monsters. Slowly, carefully, Lyra lifted one glowing hand, then touched the beast's forehead. The entire chamber exploded with silver light. The eclipse beast screamed, not in rage. Release. Darkness poured from its body like smoke ripped away by wind. Ancient temple chains hidden beneath its flesh shattered one after another across the floor. The creature's monstrous form began changing, shrinking, softening. Black smoke dissolved beneath moonlight, until finally, a massive scarred wolf collapsed before her. No longer monstrous, only wounded. The chamber stood frozen in stunned silence. The impossible had happened again. The white Luna had not destroyed the beast. She had freed it. Kale stared at Lyra, like he no longer knew where mortal women ended and legends began. The freed wolf lowered itself fully before her, then bowed its head. On be one. Every remaining wolf in the chamber followed, not from fear, from recognition. The white Luna had returned, and this time, the kingdom had witnessed mercy instead of war. Mara fell slowly to her knees. The priestess looked utterly broken. All these years, she whispered, I became terrified of repeating history that I created the same cruelty myself. Lyra looked at her quietly. You still have a choice. The older woman closed her eyes. Tears slipped silently down her face. Then Mara bowed her head before Lyra. The high priestess of the old moon temple finally knelt, and the court understood instantly. The balance of power in the north had changed forever. No one spoke for several long seconds. The ruined moon trial chamber stood beneath falling snow and shattered moonlight while the entire northern court struggled to understand what they had just witnessed. Not conquest, not slaughter. Mercy. The thing kings failed to understand until it was too late. Lyra stood in the center of the broken arena, glowing faintly silver beneath the moon, while ancient wolves bowed around her like shadows kneeling before dawn. And Prince Kale looked at her as though she had reached into the darkest parts of him and returned something he thought had died years ago. Hope. The black fractures spreading across his wolf had stopped growing, not healed completely, but slowed. The curse poisoning him trembled uncertainly beneath the completed mate bond, weakened by the white Luna's awakening. Kale staggered toward her. The entire court watched anxiously. Would she step away from him now, that she no longer needed protection? Would she become untouchable like the old queens from legend? Would power finally harden her into something distant and cold? Lyra met his gaze silently, then walked toward him too. The tension in the chamber became unbearable. Kale stopped only inches away from her. Up close he looked exhausted beyond words. Blood stained the collar of his black coat. Silver cuts marked his throat where the curse had nearly overtaken him. Yet despite the pain burning through him, his attention remained entirely fixed on her face. You stayed, he whispered roughly. The words almost shattered her heart, because he sounded genuinely surprised, as though some part of him believed loving him meant eventually leaving him. Lyra lifted her hand slowly. This time, Kyle did not flinch away. Her fingers touched his face gently. Varm. Real. The moment contact settled between them, the remaining darkness inside his wolf recoiled violently beneath the bond. Kyle inhaled sharply. Not pain this time. Relief. The court watched in stunned silence as the terrifying Prince of Winterfang closed his eyes against her touch, like a starving man finally allowed warmth. Lyra realized then how lonely he truly had been. Not simply feared, isolated, raised as a weapon, poisoned by the very people meant to guide him, forced to reject the only person capable of saving him because he believed closeness would kill her. And somehow, despite all of it, he had still tried to protect her, even badly, even painfully. Kale opened his eyes again slowly. There was no mask left in them now. No prince, no political calculation. Only raw emotion stripped painfully bare. I should have chosen you openly from the beginning, he said quietly. You were trying to keep me alive. I humiliated you. Yes. The honesty made several nobles visibly uncomfortable. Kale almost smiled despite the exhaustion in his face. You never make forgiveness easy. You never earned easy forgiveness. To the shock of the court, the prince laughed. A real laugh. Short, rough, beautiful, in a way that hurt to hear because it sounded so unfamiliar to him. Something inside the chamber softened. Even frightened nobles exchanged uncertain glances. For years, Winterfang had known Kale only as a cold future king, wrapped in violence and restraint. But the man standing beside Lyra now looked human. Dangerous still, but human. Suddenly, one of the rival Alphas stepped forward from the balcony stairs. Lord Varos of the Eastern Pax. A brutal war leader, infamous for conquering smaller territories through forced mate claims and blood duels. Several guards immediately stiffened. Varos looked between Lyra and Kale carefully, then finally lowered himself to one knee. The movement stunned the chamber. "My house recognizes the White Luna," he declared. Murmurs exploded instantly. Another Alpha followed. Then another. Within moments, nearly half the rival lords in the chamber had knelt. Not because they loved Winterfang, because power had shifted. And everyone understood it. The White Luna bloodline could unite wolves more effectively than armies ever had. That terrified the remaining nobles. One council member finally shouted what others feared to say. "If she controls the wolves, she controls the kingdoms." Panic spread instantly again. Several lords reached for weapons. Others backed away. The old fear returned with frightening speed. Lyra felt it immediately. How quickly awe became paranoia. How quickly reverence became fear of losing power. The same cycle that destroyed the previous White Luna. Kale sensed the tension too. His expression darkened dangerously. But before violence could erupt again, Lyra stepped forward. The chamber slowly quieted. She looked across the frightened court, meeting the eyes of nobles who had mocked her, ignored her, feared her, and now suddenly wished to kneel before her. For the first time in her life, they were listening, not because she screamed loudest, because she no longer feared silence. "I do not want your kingdoms," Lyra said calmly. Her voice carried effortlessly through the ruined arena. "I know what it feels like to live beneath people who treat fear as law." The chamber remained completely still. "I spent most of my life being called hollow," she continued softly. "Cursed, dangerous, unfinished." Her silver eyes moved slowly across the crowd. "And tonight, I learned something." Snow drifted through the shattered ceiling around her. The things people fear most are often simply the things they refuse to understand. No one interrupted. Even the wolves seemed to listen. Lyra looked toward the freed Eclipse wolf resting quietly beside the broken altar. "You created monsters by treating suffering like contamination instead of pain." Several temple priests lowered their heads in shame. Then Lyra turned toward the court entirely. "I will not rule through fear." The statement echoed through the chamber. Powerful precisely because it sounded true. Kale stared at her with something dangerously close to devotion, and perhaps that frightened the nobles most of all. Because the White Luna had not conquered the prince. She had changed him willingly. A horn suddenly sounded outside the fortress walls. Then another. Kyle's expression sharpened instantly. War horns. A soldier burst into the chamber moments later, covered in snow and blood. "Your Highness," he gasped. "The southern border armies have arrived." The chamber erupted. Of course they had. The rival kingdoms must have felt the awakening through their wolves hours ago. And now every ambitious ruler in the north would race toward Winterfang. Some seeking alliance, some seeking control, some seeking blood. Kale moved immediately into command despite his injuries. "Seal the western gates," he ordered sharply. "Move civilians beneath the lower fortress levels. No one enters the inner castle without my authority." The guards obeyed instantly. Not because he was prince, because after tonight, everyone finally understood exactly how dangerous he truly was when protecting something he loved. Kale turned toward Lyra and hesitated. The hesitation itself revealed everything. He wanted to ask her to stay hidden, safe, protected, but he knew she would hate it. Slowly, painfully, the prince forced himself to treat her as an equal instead. "The southern kings will demand to see you," he said quietly. Lyra nodded once. "They'll try to control the bond." "Yes, they may try to kill me." Kyle's eyes darkened instantly. "They can try." The possessive violence in his voice sent visible unease through nearby nobles. But Lyra only stepped closer. You cannot threaten every kingdom that fears me. I can begin with the closest ones. Despite herself, she smiled slightly. The expression hit Kyle harder than battle wounds ever could, because it was the first genuine smile he had ever seen from her. And for one dangerous moment, the terrifying Prince of Winterfang forgot how to breathe. Lyra saw it happen, saw the way his control slipped, saw the hunger and awe and unbearable relief burning beneath his restraint. The realization warmed her unexpectedly. For years, she had been invisible. Now the most feared man in the north looked at her like she was the only real thing left in the world. Kale noticed her watching him. His voice lowered. That look will get me killed. What look? The one where you almost stop guarding yourself around me. The honesty stole her breath briefly. Because he was right. Slowly, carefully, she was beginning to trust him, which felt far more dangerous than the wolves or prophecies ever had. Outside the fortress, war horns continued echoing across the snowy mountains. The kingdoms were coming. The White Luna had awakened, and the real war had only just begun. By dawn, Winterfang Fortress looked less like a royal castle and more like a kingdom bracing for siege. Snow buried the outer battlements in silver-white drifts, while war fires burned across the mountain paths below. Thousands of wolves gathered beyond the fortress walls, some belonging to Winterfang soldiers, others to the rival armies, now surrounding the mountain. Not attacking, waiting, watching. The White Luna's awakening had frozen the north in place. No ruler wanted to strike first, not until they understood whether Lyra would become salvation or catastrophe. Inside the fortress, tension spread like wildfire through every corridor. Servants whispered prayers beneath their breath. Temple loyalists quietly vanished before dawn. Rival nobles demanded emergency councils. Messengers rode through the blizzard, carrying news to distant kingdoms. And at the center of all of it, Lyra sat alone beside a frost-covered window, while healers tried unsuccessfully to convince Prince Kale to remain in bed. You were nearly torn apart 3 hours ago, one healer snapped. Kale ignored him completely. The prince stood near the chamber doorway, pulling fresh black gloves over scarred hands, while silver bandages wrapped tightly around his ribs beneath an open dark tunic. The curse marks across his throat had faded slightly overnight, but not enough. Lyra noticed the subtle tremor in his hands whenever he thought no one was watching. The poison still lived inside him. Kale caught her staring. You should rest. So should you. I'm less reasonable. That isn't the defense you think it is. One corner of his mouth twitched faintly. The small expression startled her more than his rare smiles usually did. Kale only smiled when exhausted enough to forget himself. The realization made something unexpectedly soft ache inside her chest. The healers finally gave up and left muttering darkly about stubborn royalty. Silence settled through the chamber after the doors closed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The atmosphere between them had changed after the bond completed. Everything felt sharper now, closer. She could sense his emotions faintly through the mating bond fatigue, vigilance, restrained anger, and beneath all of it, here, constantly her, as though some part of him remained aware of her every breath now. KL walked toward the frost-covered window slowly. Below the mountain cliffs, distant war banners moved through the snowstorms like dark waves. The southern kings won't wait long, he said quietly. Lyra looked down at the armies, gathering beneath Winterfang. How many came? Enough to start another wolf war if diplomacy fails. His voice remained calm, too calm. Lyra turned toward him fully. You think they'll try to force a claim? Kale's silence answered for him. Cold spread through her stomach. White Luna bloodlines were ancient political weapons. If rival kings believed children born from her blood could control wolf bonds across kingdoms, they would never stop hunting her. Kale leaned one hand against the stone beside the window. And there's worse. The bond carried a pulse of dread through him. Lyra frowned slightly. What aren't you telling me? His jaw tightened. The prophecy wasn't fully translated. The room suddenly felt colder. Kale reached into his coat slowly and removed a folded parchment sealed with black wax. The paper looked ancient enough to crumble from touch alone. I found this after my father died. Lyra unfolded it carefully. Ancient silver ink covered the page in worn symbols she somehow understood instinctively the moment she touched them. White Luna shall rise beneath broken moonlight. The black wolf shall kneel beside her. Together, they shall unite the northern crowns, or drown them in ash and blood. But should the white Luna give her heart freely, the last gate shall open. Lyra's pulse slowed dangerously. The last gate? Kale looked toward the mountains outside. There are older things in the north than wolves. The bond carried fear again. Real fear. Not for himself. For her. The temple wasn't only hiding the eclipse beast beneath Winterfang. Kale continued quietly. They were guarding something buried deeper. Lyra stared at him. What? No one knows exactly. The records were destroyed centuries ago. But according to the oldest legends, the White Luna bloodline was created to seal it. Silence crashed through the chamber. Lyra suddenly understood why Mara had become desperate enough to poison princes and manipulate kingdoms. If the White Luna existed not only as ruler, but as lock and key to something ancient, then her awakening threatened far more than politics. A sharp knock interrupted the conversation. Kyle's expression darkened instantly. Into. The doors opened. Lord Varos stepped inside, accompanied by 2 Eastern guards, clad in dark wolf fur armor. The rival Alpha bowed slightly, not deeply enough to imply submission, but enough to acknowledge power. Your Highness, Varos said carefully. The southern rulers request audience immediately. Kale's eyes narrowed. They can wait. They brought armies. So did I. Varos almost smiled. The dangerous amusement in the Alpha's face made Lyra uneasy. Men like Varos respected strength above morality. He would follow the White Luna while she appeared powerful. But if weakness emerged, he would become a threat instantly. Varos's gaze shifted toward Lyra, and for the first time since the awakening, she saw fear in a warlord's eyes. Not hatred, recognition. As if ancient instincts deep within him understood exactly what stood before him now. The wolves outside have stopped fighting one another, Varos said quietly. Kale frowned. What? The border packs. Varos folded his arms slowly. For the first time in recorded history, southern wolves and eastern wolves are resting together. Lyra's pulse skipped. That should have been impossible. Rival pack instincts ran deep. Wolves from enemy kingdoms often attacked each other on sight regardless of treaties. Yet, through the bond awakening, something had changed. The White Luna's influence had begun spreading already. Varos studied her carefully. The kingdoms will not ignore that. Kyle's expression turned lethal. They will if they value breathing. The rival Alpha laughed softly. There's the prince I remember. But his eyes remained fixed on Lyra. Calculating. Interested. Dangerous. Before Kale could respond, another howl suddenly echoed across the fortress. Not ordinary. Ancien. Every wolf in the castle froze instantly. Lyra's blood turned cold. Because she recognized the sound. The freed eclipse wolf. The massive creature had remained beneath the ruined moon trial chamber overnight, under heavy guard. Yet now, its howl rolled through the fortress, with enough force to shake windows. And something answered it. Deep beneath the mountain, the entire castle trembled. Kale swore violently. The bond between him and Lyra surged painfully at the exact same moment. A door. Something sealed. Something ancient. Opening. Far below the fortress, a second howl rose from the darkness beneath the mountain. Older than kingdoms. Older than wolves. And suddenly every torch in Winterfang went out simultaneously. Darkness swallowed the fortress. Servants screamed somewhere deep within the lower halls. Steel rang against stone as guards drew weapons instinctively. Outside the walls, thousands of wolves erupted into violent howling that rolled across the mountains like an approaching storm. Then silence crashed down. A suffocating, unnatural silence. Even the wind stopped. Lyra rose from the window instantly as silver light flickered beneath her skin. The mating bond between her and Kale pulsed hard enough to hurt, both of them feeling the same thing simultaneously. Something ancient had awakened beneath Winterfang. Something aware. Kale crossed the chamber in 2 strides and grabbed his sword belt from the table. "Stay close to me." Lyra gave him a flat look. The prince visibly realized how ridiculous that sounded after last night. His jaw tightened. "I know you can defend yourself. Then stop talking like I'm still trapped in the East Tower." A flicker of reluctant admiration crossed his face despite the tension. "Fine," he muttered. "Fight beside me instead." That answer pleased her far more than it should have. Another tremor shook the fortress violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lord Varos swore under his breath. "That didn't sound like wolves." "No," Kyle said grimly. "It didn't." The torches suddenly reignited, but not with ordinary flame. Silver fire burned through every corridor in the fortress. The same pale moonfire that had erupted during Lyra's awakening. The white wolf inside her stirred immediately. Warning. Memory. Recognition. Lyra's breath slowed. "It's calling me." Kale's expression darkened instantly. "Absolutely not." She turned toward him. "You felt it too." "Yes. Which is exactly why you are not going anywhere near it." The protectiveness in his voice slammed through the bond so intensely she nearly lost focus. "Not command." Fear. Real fear. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Lyra stepped closer carefully. "You cannot protect me from my own blood forever." Kale's eyes burned. "I can try." The honesty of it almost hurt. But before she could answer, the chamber doors burst open. A royal guard stumbled inside, covered in blood. "Your Highness," he gasped. "The lower sanctum seal has broken." Every muscle in Kyle's body went rigid. What escaped? The guard looked pale with terror. We don't know." A deep roar echoed somewhere beneath the fortress. Stone cracked loudly through distant corridors. Another scream followed. "Not wolf. Human." Kale moved immediately. "Varos, secure the upper halls. No one enters the sanctum without my order." The Alpha nodded sharply. Kale turned toward Lyra next, and hesitated. Again, the instinct to shield her warred visibly against the growing realization that she was no longer someone who could simply be hidden away from danger. Lyra saw the conflict clearly now. Not arrogance. Love struggling against fear. Slowly, Kale exhaled. Then, held his hand toward her. "Come with me." The words carried trust this time, not control. Something warm tightened painfully inside her chest. Lyra placed her hand in his. The mating bond surged instantly between them, silver light briefly flickering beneath both their skin. Varos watched the exchange carefully, uneasy, because every ruler in the north understood the danger now. If Kyle and Lyra truly stood united, their combined bloodlines might become unstoppable. The lower sanctum corridors beneath Winterfang were older than the fortress itself. Ancient stone passageways spiraled deep beneath the mountain, lit only by trembling silver fire. Temple symbols covered the walls, many cracked or half-buried beneath centuries of repairs. And everywhere, blood. Guards lay scattered across the lower halls with claw marks torn through armor. Not killed deliberately, thrown aside, as though something enormous had simply walked through them without slowing. Kale's wolf pressed violently against the inside of his skin the deeper they descended. Lyra felt it through the bond agitation, territorial fury, and beneath it all, fear. The prince hated that emotion. She sensed him trying to bury it immediately. "You've been down here before," Lyra said quietly. Kale's silence confirmed it. "The temple brought me here as a child." His voice echoed coldly through the corridor. "They called it purification." Lyra's stomach tightened. The silver poison. The curse. This was where they did it. Kyle stopped before a massive iron gate split open down the center, as though struck by enormous force. Ancient claw marks gouged through solid metal. The sight unnerved even him. The white wolf inside Lyra stirred harder. Closer now. Whatever had awakened beneath Winterfang, it knew she was coming. Beyond the destroyed gate, the sanctum opened into a cavern, so vast the ceiling disappeared into darkness overhead. Black stone pillars rose from underground lakes, glowing faintly silver beneath the moonfire. And at the center of the cavern stood a door. Not wood, not iron, something older. A colossal circular seal, carved directly into the mountain itself. Ancient silver chains wrapped across its surface, while symbols burned faintly beneath centuries of dust. One of those chains had snapped. Lyra Vale. The white wolf inside her went completely still. Memory flooded her mind suddenly. Not her own. Another white Luna, standing before this same gate centuries ago. Blood covering her hands. King screaming behind her. The mountain shaking apart while she sealed something terrible inside the darkness beyond the door. Lyra staggered slightly. Kyle caught her immediately. "What did you see?" Her voice barely emerged above a whisper. This gate was never meant to imprison monsters. The cavern trembled again. Then, slowly, something moved behind the seal. A shadow. Enormous. Watching. Every instinct in Kale's body turned lethal instantly. He stepped in front of Lyra without hesitation, sword half drawn. The movement would have annoyed her once. Now, it only made her chest ache. Because even knowing what she had become, he still chose to stand between her and danger first. A low voice suddenly echoed from behind the gate. Ancien. Deep. Not entirely human. At last, the entire cavern shook violently. Lyra's pulse thundered. The voice knew her. No. It recognized her bloodline. Kyle's hand tightened around his sword. "Who are you?" A long silence followed. Then the voice answered softly. "The last king your moon goddess feared." The silver chains around the gate suddenly snapped one after another, and the mountain began to collapse. Stone exploded from the ceiling. Kale grabbed Lyra instantly and pulled her backward as massive chunks of rock crashed into the underground lake, hard enough to send freezing water surging across the cavern floor. Guards shouted from the upper corridors. Somewhere deeper beneath the mountain, ancient mechanisms groaned like dying beasts awakening after centuries of sleep. The colossal gate continued cracking apart. One chain snapped, then another. Silver symbols burned violently across the stone seal, while darkness poured through the widening fractures like living smoke. The voice behind the gate laughed, softly. Not mad, patient, as though it had already waited long enough to stop fearing time. Kale's wolf erupted beneath his skin in pure fury. The prince drew his sword fully now, black shadows curling along the blade as his golden eyes sharpened into something almost inhuman. "Get behind me." Lyra stared at him incredulously even now. "The mountain is collapsing and you still think I'm hiding behind you?" "Yes." Despite the chaos, a breathless laugh nearly escaped her. Kyle looked offended by the sound. "Lyra, you are impossible. And you are walking toward an ancient sealed horror with no hesitation whatsoever. Because it called me. That is not comforting." Another violent tremor shook the cavern. The shattered gate groaned open another few inches. Something enormous moved behind it. Not fully visible, but massive enough to dwarf the eclipse beast. Kale's expression darkened immediately. Even wounded, his wolf recognized a predator. The freed eclipse wolf suddenly emerged from the sanctum tunnel behind them, moving quickly despite its injuries. Guards scattered in panic before realizing the creature no longer attacked. The great scarred wolf stopped beside Lyra protectively, then lowered its head toward the gate and growled. Fear. Real fear. Lyra's blood ran cold. Whatever waited behind the seal frightened even ancient creatures. The voice echoed again. "You carry her eyes." Lyra stiffena. The white wolf inside her surged violently at the sound. Kale stepped closer to her immediately. "Do not answer it." The voice chuckled softly. "Protective, just like the last one." The prince's entire body went rigid. "What did you say?" Silence. Then, slowly, a massive claw emerged through the broken gate. Black scales covered its surface instead of fur. Ancient silver runes burned beneath the skin. Not wolf. Something older. Something impossible. Kyle's face went pale. Dragon. The word barely left his throat. Lyra stared in shock. Dragons had vanished from the north before the wolf kingdoms even existed. Most scholars believed they were myths created to exaggerate old wars. But the claw gripping the broken seal was very real. The voice spoke again. The Moon Queens called us monsters because they feared what we became after the betrayal. Another chain snapped. The gate split wider. A massive golden eye opened in the darkness behind it. Ancien. Terrible. Lonely. Lyra's breath caught painfully. Not because of fear. Because the creature sounded tired. The same exhaustion she had heard in the Eclipse Beast. The same loneliness buried inside Kyle. The dragon shifted behind the seal slowly, revealing glimpses of black scales, scarred with silver wounds old enough to belong to history itself. "Who sealed you here?" Lyra whispered. The dragon's eye fixed entirely on her. "Your bloodline." The cavern fell silent, except for falling stone. Kyle's wolf snarled violently. Do not listen to it. But Lyra couldn't look away. Something deep inside her recognized the truth already. The White Luna bloodline had not merely united wolves. It had ruled something far older once. The dragon spoke carefully now. The Moon Queens and Dragon Kings once ruled together. Another memory flashed violently through Lyra's mind. White wolves running beneath silver skies beside enormous dragons, soaring over frozen mountains. Ancient kingdoms burning. Betrayal. War. A queen crying while sealing black-scaled dragons beneath the earth. Lyra gasped sharply. KL caught her arm. "What are you seeing?" "The bloodlines weren't enemies originally," she whispered. "They were allies." The dragon's eye narrowed with approval. "At last. One who remembers." KL's expression turned grim. "Memory magic." "No," Lyra whispered. Instinctively, her hand touched one of the glowing runes along the broken gate. The moment her skin connected, the entire cavern exploded with silver light. Kale cursed and pulled her backward immediately, but it was too late. Ancient magic surged through the mountain. The seal shattered completely. A roar thundered through Winterfang, strong enough to shake snow from the peaks outside. Then, slowly, the dragon emerged. Massive black scales gleamed beneath moonfire while silver scars crossed its enormous body like old chains burned directly into flesh. Its wings unfolded across the cavern with terrifying size, scraping stone pillars as ancient golden eyes settled onto Lyra. Nordhunger. Recognition. The dragon lowered its head slowly before her. The entire mountain trembled beneath its weight. Guards fell backward in terror. Even Kale looked shaken. Because impossible things kept becoming real around Lyra. The dragon studied her silently, then finally spoke one sentence that froze the blood in everyone present. "The last White Luna was your mother." Silence crashed through the cavern. Lyra stopped breathing. Kyle's head snapped toward her instantly. "What?" The dragon's gaze never left Lyra. "She sealed us beneath the mountain to stop the Wolf Kings from slaughtering the remaining dragon bloodlines." Another memory struck Lyra hard enough to nearly bring her to her knees. A woman with silver eyes and white fur kneeling before the gate while holding a crying child. Her child. Lyra. The woman kissed the child's forehead once before turning back toward war. Then blood. Fire. Screaming. Lyra staggered violently. KL caught her before she fell. The bond between them pulsed painfully as shock and grief crashed through her chest. "My mother." Her voice broke. "She wasn't dead when I was born." The dragon's ancient eyes softened unexpectedly. "No." The word shattered something inside her. All her life she had been told her mother died giving birth. Another lie. Another carefully constructed silence. Kyle's expression darkened murderously. "The temple lied again. They feared what your union would awaken," the dragon replied calmly. "The White Luna bloodline was nearly exterminated after the war. Your mother hid the child among wolves before returning here." Lyra's vision blurred suddenly, not because of power. Bine. Her mother had abandoned her to save her, and died alone beneath the mountain. The white wolf inside her mourned. Kyle felt it instantly through the bond. Without hesitation, he pulled Lyra closer against him. Not speaking, not demanding strength from her, simply holding her, while grief tore through her chest. The dragon watched silently, then lowered its head slightly toward Kale. Interesting. Respectful. As though recognizing something unexpected in the prince. The black wolf chose well, the dragon murmured. Kale stiffened slightly. I didn't choose wisely, he said quietly. I chose desperately. Lyra looked up at him. Kale met her eyes with painful honesty. And I would do it again. The words hit harder than any grand declaration ever could, because he sounded completely ruined by the truth of them. Another tremor shook the cavern overhead. The dragon lifted its head sharply. The northern kings are coming, it warned. Kyle's expression hardened instantly. How many? Enough to repeat history. Outside the mountain fortress, war horns suddenly echoed across the snow-covered valleys. Not one kingdom. All of them. The armies had arrived. The sound of war horns rolled across the mountains like thunder, one after another. Eastern kingdoms, southern packs, northern war clans, even distant western banners that had not crossed Winterfang borders in decades, all coming for the same reason. The White Luna had awakened, and kingdoms built on fear would never allow power like hers to exist peacefully. Snow shook loose from the cavern ceiling as another horn echoed through the mountain. Kale released Lyra slowly, though his hand lingered at her waist one heartbeat longer than necessary. Nostalgia, possession, relief that she was still alive. The bond between them had become impossible to ignore now. Every emotion burned brighter. Every glance lingered longer. Every touch felt dangerous. The dragon watched them carefully with ancient golden eyes. The kings will demand her blood, it rumbled. Kale's expression turned ice-cold immediately. They can demand from their graves. Even the dragon seemed amused by the answer. Violent little wolf. Old lizard. Lyra stared between them in disbelief. You're insulting an ancient dragon. It started first. The dragon actually snorted smoke in amusement. For one surreal moment, tension cracked just enough for Lyra to realize something strange. Kale sounded younger around her, less like the frozen prince everyone feared, more like the man buried underneath years of restraint and poison and duty. Then another explosion shook the mountain. Reality crashed back immediately. Kale's face hardened. We need to move. If those armies breach the fortress before we stabilize the lower sanctum. A scream echoed from the upper corridors, followed by steel clashing violently. Kyle swore. They're already inside. Varos burst through the sanctum entrance seconds later, covered in blood and snow. One side of his face carried a fresh claw wound, and 3 eastern soldiers followed him, dragging injured guards behind them. The southern kings breached the outer gate. Varos growled. Temple loyalists opened it from inside. Kale's eyes turned murderous instantly. Of course they had. Even after Mera's fall, factions within the temple still believed Lyra's existence threatened the world. Varos looked toward the dragon, stopped, blinking slowly. I'm not even asking anymore. No, Kale agreed grimly. You probably shouldn't. Another horn echoed much closer now. Winterfang's outer defenses were failing. Kyle immediately shifted into command. Get civilians into the lower fortress tunnels, he ordered. Barricade the eastern passages. No one reaches this sanctum. Varos nodded sharply before hesitating, then looked directly at Lyra. The southern kings brought moonchain hunters. The words changed everything. Lyra frowned slightly. Moonchain hunters? Kale's entire body went rigid beside her. The dragon growled low. Varos looked grim. They came prepared for White Luna blood. Cold spread through Lyra instantly. Moonchain hunters were ancient executioners, trained specifically to kill divine bloodlines. Unlike ordinary soldiers, they carried enchanted silver capable of severing spirit bonds permanently, meaning they could kill her wolf, not merely her body. Kale noticed her expression immediately. His voice lowered dangerously. How many? 30, maybe more. The prince's wolf surged violently beneath his skin. 30 moonchain hunters was not an army. It was an extermination squad. Kale turned toward Lyra fully. You're leaving Winterfang. Her eyes narrowed instantly. No, this isn't negotiation. Then stop pretending I'm participating in one. Varos looked deeply uncomfortable. The dragon looked entertained. Kale stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. Lyra, listen to me carefully. The bond pulsed painfully hard between them. Fear. Real fear. Not for the kingdom. Foya. They don't want to capture you, Kale said quietly. They'll tear your soul apart to stop the White Luna from spreading. And if I run? His silence answered. The kingdoms would hunt her forever. Kyle hated it. She could feel the rage burning through him. Because for the first time in his life, the prince had found something he could not control through force alone. He could kill armies, threaten kings, destroy traitors. But he could not lock Lyra away safely, without becoming exactly the kind of man she would eventually despise. The realization was tearing him apart. Lyra stepped closer slowly, then touched the side of his face gently. Kale shut his eyes briefly at the contact. The smallest gesture still affected him like fire. You once told me surviving mattered more than dignity, she whispered. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. No. Her thumb brushed lightly against his skin. You were lonely. The words hit him hard enough to hurt through the bond. Kale opened his eyes slowly, and for one unguarded moment, Lyra saw how terrified he truly was of losing her. Not because of prophecy, not because of kingdoms, because somewhere between the wedding and the moonfire and the blood and the grief, he had fallen hopelessly in love with her. The realization settled softly between them. Terrible timing, terrible circumstances, completely undeniable. Varos abruptly cleared his throat very loudly. Not to interrupt whatever emotionally devastating moment this is, Kyle glared at him murderously. But we are extremely close to dying. The dragon sighed, smoke through its nostrils. Mortal timing remains unfortunate. Another explosion thundered overhead. Stone cracked through the sanctum ceiling. The war had reached the inner fortress. Kale instantly shifted back into command mode. We hold the lower sanctum, he ordered sharply. If the Moonchain hunters reach this chamber, they'll try to sever Lyra's wolf first. Varos nodded. What about the dragon? The ancient creature's golden eyes gleamed. I have been imprisoned for 4 centuries. Silver fire curled faintly through its jaws. I would like to stretch my wings. Varos started. Right. Of course. Kale turned toward Lyra one last time before moving, and hesitated again. Always hesitating with her now, as though every goodbye carried too much weight suddenly. Finally, quietly, he said, if anything happens, Lyra, cut him off immediately. No. The force in her voice startled even him. She stepped closer until only inches separated them. We survived this together. The bond flared violently between them. Kyle looked at her like the words physically hurt, because hope frightened him more than pain ever had. Slowly, carefully, he leaned his forehead against hers. The entire world seemed to stop. No prince, no White Luna, no Var. Only 2 exhausted people holding each other together beneath a collapsing mountain. Kale's voice dropped, almost below hearing. You are the first thing that ever made me want a future. Lyra's breath caught painfully. Then the fortress shook hard enough to split the cavern floor. Reality returned brutally. Kyle pulled away first, only because he had to. The prince turned toward the sanctum entrance, shadows already rising around him as his wolf prepared for war. The dragon unfurled its enormous wings. Varos drew both swords, and Lyra finally stopped feeling like the frightened invisible girl abandoned by the world, because for the first time in her life, she knew exactly who she was. The White Luna, daughter of the last Moon Queen, mate of the Black Wolf Prince. And tonight, the kingdoms of the north would learn to fear the woman they once called Hollow. The battle for Winterfang began beneath a blood-red moon. War horns screamed across the mountain fortress, while snowstorms swallowed the outer walls in white fury. Fire burned along the battlements. Wolves tore through courtyards slick with ice and blood. Steel clashed against silver chain, weapons forged specifically for spirit execution. And above it all, the White Luna's power spread through the night like rising moonlight. Lyra emerged from the lower sanctum beside Kale, just as the inner fortress gates collapsed. The sight waiting beyond the shattered archway looked like the beginning of another ancient war. Southern kings in black armor stood across the courtyard, surrounded by moonchain hunters cloaked in silver. Eastern mercenaries fought temple loyalists through burning corridors. Winterfang soldiers held defensive lines around civilians fleeing toward underground shelters. And overhead, massive black wings swept through the storm. The dragon soared above the fortress for the first time in 400 years. Its roar shook the mountains. Entire armies froze in terror, because myths were never supposed to return all at once. One of the southern rulers stepped forward through the snow, King Aeron of Duskbane, older than Kale by nearly 20 years, with silver-threaded dark hair and the hard eyes of a man who had spent his life conquering weaker kingdoms before they could threaten him. His gaze locked instantly onto Lyra. Not awe, calculation. There it was. The exact thing Mara had feared centuries ago. Kings looking at the white Luna and seeing power to possess. Aeron's expression sharpened further when he noticed Kale standing protectively beside her. "You completed the bond," the Southern King said coldly. Kale's hand moved toward his sword. "Careful." The warning barely sounded human. Aeron ignored it. The Northern Kingdoms cannot survive under one bloodline's influence again. Lyra stepped forward before Kale could answer. "You came with executioners before you came with diplomacy." Several moonchain hunters raised their weapons immediately. Silver hooks glinted beneath moonlight, soul-severing chains. Kyle's wolf surged violently beneath his skin at the sight of them. Aeron's face remained calm. "I came because fear spreads faster than reason. And fear told you to invade another kingdom? It told me to stop a war before it starts." The answer was dangerously sincere. That was the problem. Every ruler here believed themselves justified. Kyle stepped beside Lyra fully now, shadows curling across the snow around his boots. "You crossed my borders with hunters trained to slaughter divine bloodlines, and you bonded yourself to one." The tension snapped tighter instantly. Snow swirled violently between the armies. The moonchain hunters slowly spread outward, surrounding the courtyard in formation. Kyle noticed immediately. His expression darkened murderously. "They're positioning to strike her." Aeron didn't deny it. "If the White Luna dies tonight, the kingdoms remain divided but stable." Lyra felt the bond erupt with fury inside KL. Not political anger, pure instinctive mate rage. Dangerous, terrifying. The Black Wolf Prince looked one heartbeat away from slaughtering everyone in the courtyard, and perhaps sensing it, Aeron added quietly, "If she lives, every throne in the north eventually burns." Silence crashed through the fortress. The words echoed too close to prophecy, too close to truth, because Lyra herself still didn't know what awakening completely might unleash. Kale looked at her briefly, just once, but the emotion in that glance nearly destroyed her. Not doubt, never doubt. Fear that he might fail to protect her. Then the first moonchain flew. Kale moved before thought. Darkness exploded outward from him as his sword intercepted the silver chain mid-air. The impact cracked stone beneath his feet, and instantly, the entire courtyard erupted into war. Moonchain hunters surged forward through the snow. Winterfang wolves attacked from the battlements. Southern soldiers slammed into Kale's forces beneath storms of silver fire and black shadow. The dragon descended screaming from the sky. Its enormous body crashed through the fortress towers, scattering entire battle lines beneath black wings and ancient flame. Lyra barely had time to react before 3 moonchain hunters charged directly toward her. Fast, précise. Their weapons glowed with anti-spirit runes, specifically designed to sever wolf bonds permanently. They were trained for this, to kill creatures like her. The first hunter swung a hooked silver chain toward her throat. Lyra caught it barehanded. Moonfire exploded across the courtyard. The hunter screamed as silver melted instantly in her grip. The white wolf surged through her body effortlessly now, not consuming her, becoming part of her. Another hunter lunged from behind. Before Lyra could turn, A black wolf tore the man apart midair. Kyle shifted partially through the battlefield like living shadow, claws drenched in blood as his cursed wolf ripped through attackers with terrifying brutality. The prince fought like a man protecting the last fragile thing left in the world. Every instinct inside him centered entirely on Lyra. A moon chain wrapped suddenly around Kale's arm. Silver runes ignited. Kyle roared in agony. The chain burned directly into his wolf spirit. Lyra's heart stopped, because she felt the pain through the bond. The prince dropped briefly to one knee while hunters rushed toward him from every direction. Kyle. Silver fire exploded outward from Lyra instinctively. The courtyard vanished beneath blinding moonlight. Every wolf froze. Every soldier stopped breathing. The White Luna unleashed her power fully for the first time. Ancient silver symbols spread across the snow beneath her feet, while the white wolf spirit towered behind her, enormous enough to eclipse the fortress walls themselves. The moon chain hunters stumbled backward in terror. Tulat. Lyra raised one glowing hand, and every silver chain in the battlefield shattered simultaneously. The sound rang across the mountains like breaking glass. Hunters screamed as sacred weapons forged over generations crumbled into useless fragments around them. The kingdoms froze in horror, because no one had ever done that before, not even the previous White Luna. Aeron stared at Lyra, like he was witnessing the end of the world, and perhaps he was. Kyle slowly rose beside her despite blood running down his arm. His eyes locked onto her glowing figure with naked awe. Not fear. Never fear. Only overwhelming devotion. The bond between them surged violently. The Black Wolf Prince and the White Luna standing together beneath a blood-red moon while armies trembled before them. Exactly the image ancient prophecies warned kings about. Aeron saw it too, and made his choice. "Kill them both," he roared. The remaining hunters charged. At the same moment, a temple arrow flew from the fortress walls, not toward Lyra, toward Kyle. Lyra saw it too late. The silver-tipped arrow pierced directly through Kale's side. The prince staggered violently. The battlefield froze. Lyra's scream shattered the night. Everything stopped. The sound that tore from Lyra's throat did not sound entirely human anymore. Moonlight exploded across the battlefield hard enough to blind soldiers nearest to her, while the mating bond between her and Kale convulsed violently with pain. The prince dropped to one knee in the snow. Blood spread black-red beneath him instantly. The silver arrow buried in his side glowed with temple runes designed specifically for one purpose: to kill royal wolves slowly. Lyra reached him before anyone else could move. Kyle. His name broke apart in her mouth. The prince tried to rise immediately despite the wound. Of course he did. Even now. Even bleeding into the snow. "Don't," Lyra whispered sharply, pushing him back down. Kale caught her wrist weakly. His breathing had become uneven. The silver poison on the arrow was already spreading through his bloodstream. "I'm fine." The lie was pathetic, and somehow that frightened her more, because Kale Draven never lied badly unless he was truly desperate. Around them, the battlefield hesitated uncertainly. Even the southern armies looked shaken now. The White Luna, kneeling in blood beside the Black Wolf Prince, while silver fire spiraled violently around them. The image felt too much like prophecy becoming real. Aeron understood it immediately, and fear finally crossed his face. "Finish it," the Southern King shouted. The Moonchain hunters surged forward again. But before they reached Lyra, the dragon landed between the armies. The impact shattered frozen stone across the courtyard. Massive black wings unfolded through storms of snow, while ancient golden eyes burned with terrifying fury. Enough. The dragon's voice rolled across the battlefield like thunder. Several wolves collapsed, instantly beneath the force of it. Even kings stepped backward instinctively. The ancient creature lowered its enormous head toward Kyle briefly, then toward Lyra, and something changed in its expression. Recognition. Not of power, of love. The dragon looked almost sad. "You carry the same grief as your mother." Lyra barely heard it. Her hands pressed desperately against Kale's wound, while silver light flickered wildly beneath her skin. The arrow had pierced dangerously deep. And worse, the curse inside Kale was reacting violently to the temple poison. Black fractures spread beneath his skin again. Faster this time. The prince grabbed her wrist suddenly. Listen to me. No. Lyra. No. Her voice cracked hard enough to hurt. Kale stared at her for a long moment. Then something inside his expression softened completely. Not prince. Not warrior. Only him. Only the man who had spent most of his life believing love inevitably became weakness. I wanted more time with you, he admitted quietly. The confession nearly shattered her. Snow fell heavily around them. The battlefield had gone eerily still, because everyone could feel it. The white Luna stood on the edge of losing control, and if she broke, none of them knew what would happen. Lyra's silver eyes lifted slowly toward the fortress walls. Temple loyalists. She found the archer immediately. A priest, hidden among the battlements, clutching another silver arrow with shaking hands. Fear, not hatred. Fear again. Always fear. And suddenly, Lyra became exhausted by it. Exhausted of kingdoms murdering each other because terrified people kept convincing themselves cruelty was protection. Kael's breathing worsened. The bond pulsed weakly now. Panic clawed through her chest. The white wolf inside her stirred violently. Choice again. The wolf wanted to save him, but instinct warned her there would be a cost. Ancient power always demanded one. The dragon stepped closer slowly, golden eyes fixed on Lyra. There is one way. Kyle immediately looked up sharply. No. The dragon ignored him. The white Luna can purge death from bonded blood. Lyra's pulse stumbled. Hope. Terrible, dangerous hope. But Kale's expression had turned furious. It nearly killed the last queen. The dragon's silence confirmed everything. Lyra looked between them. What does it cost? Kale grabbed her arm harder despite the pain ripping through him. You are not doing it. Coel. No. For the first time since meeting him, genuine fear broke completely through his control. If you force a full soul-binding ritual now, the wolf spirit may consume what remains of your human life. The battlefield remained frozen around them, while armies listened in stunned silence. Lyra stared at him. You would rather die? Yes. The answer came instantly, without hesitation, because to Kale, her life mattered more than his own survival. The realization hit with unbearable force. The prince's hand trembled slightly against her wrist. I spent years trying to keep this kingdom from destroying you, he whispered. I will not become the reason you disappear. Something inside Lyra cracked open completely then. Not power. Love. Deep enough to terrify her. Slowly, she touched his face again. Kale closed his eyes briefly beneath her hand. The smallest touch still undid him. You once asked why I stayed, she whispered softly. His eyes opened. Silver tears burned behind hers now. I stayed because even when you hurt me, you never stopped trying to protect me. The prince looked ruined by the words. Lyra leaned forward slowly until her forehead rested against his. The mating bond ignited violently. Silver light spiraled around them both. Kyle realized what she intended instantly. No. His voice broke. For the first time. Actually broke. Lyra, please. The plea shattered her heart. But she already knew her choice. Not because prophecy demanded it. Not because kingdoms needed saving. Because she loved him. And for the first time in her lonely, silent life, someone loved her enough to fear losing her more than losing power. The white Luna rose slowly to her feet. Moonlight engulfed the battlefield. The white wolf spirit emerged fully behind her, enormous enough to blot out the storm-dark sky itself. Every wolf bowed instinctively. Even the dragon lowered its head. Lyra turned toward the armies surrounding Winterfang. Silver fire burned in her eyes. If one more arrow flies tonight, she said quietly, I will end this war so completely no kingdom will remember how to raise banners again. The entire battlefield froze, because everyone believed her. Aeron looked shaken for the first time since arriving. The southern king slowly lowered his sword. On everyone. Other rulers followed. Not surrender. Understanding. The White Luna was not merely powerful. She was grieving. And grieving divine creatures were the most dangerous things in existence. Lyra knelt beside Kale again, then gently placed both hands over the silver arrow embedded in his side. The white wolf inside her surged forward completely. Moonlight swallowed the battlefield. Kale grabbed her wrist desperately. Terror filled his eyes now, not of death, of losing her. "Don't leave me," he whispered. The words nearly destroyed her. Lyra smiled softly through tears. "Then survive," and the White Luna gave her soul to the bond. Silver light consumed the battlefield. Not fire, not magic. Something older, something alive. The snow beneath Lyra and Kale dissolved into glowing mist while ancient symbols spread across the courtyard in enormous spiraling circles. Every wolf in Winterfang lowered itself completely to the ground, trembling beneath the force of the soul-binding ritual unfolding before them. The dragon shut its eyes. Even it looked afraid now. Lyra barely felt the cold anymore. The white wolf had moved fully inside her. Not beside her, not behind her, within her soul itself. Power flooded through the mating bond between her and Kale, so violently it hurt to breathe. She felt every wound inside him, every year of poison, every lonely night spent believing he would die before anyone ever truly touched him without fear. And Kale felt her too. All of her. The little girl standing alone at winter festivals, while other children shifted beneath moonlight. The silence, the isolation, the desperate hidden hope she buried every time someone looked at her like an omen instead of a person. His chest nearly broke beneath the weight of it. "Lyra," he whispered weakly, but her attention had already gone deeper, into the curse. The poison wrapped around Kale's wolf spirit like black chains buried through flesh and bone. Temple magic, ancient fear given form. Years of suffering forced into his bloodline by people terrified of prophecy. The White Luna touched the chains, and the chains screamed. Kale arched violently in pain as silver light ripped through the curse infecting him. Black smoke erupted from beneath his skin, while the bond between them blazed brighter and brighter beneath the storm-dark sky. The battlefield watched in stunned silence. No one moved. No one dared, because they were witnessing something sacred and dangerous. The curse fought desperately. Lyra felt it trying to tear through her own soul now, clawing against the White Luna spirit, searching for weakness. But the White Wolf did not fight with rage, only certainty. The chains broke one by one. Kale screamed. The sound ripped through the mountains hard enough to shake snow loose from distant cliffs. Then suddenly, silence. The black smoke vanished. The darkness poisoning Kale's wolf shattered completely beneath moonlight. And for the first time in years, his wolf stood whole. The massive black spirit rose behind him slowly, fur no longer split by cursed fractures. Its golden eyes burned bright and alive beneath the falling snow. The battlefield gasped collectively. The prince's wolf had healed. Kale stared upward in shock as strength flooded back into his body all at once. The silver arrow dissolved into ash beneath Lyra's glowing hands. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Lyra swayed violently. The white light surrounding her flickered. Kyle caught her immediately. Fear slammed through the bond hard enough to suffocate him. Lyra. Her skin had gone ice cold. Silver cracks spread faintly beneath her eyes like fractures through moonlight itself. The dragon moved closer sharply. She gave too much. Kale's heart stopped. "No." Lyra smiled, faintly despite exhaustion hollowing her voice. "You survived. That's not enough." The panic in him became unbearable now. The prince, who had stood against armies without flinching, looked utterly terrified, because he could finally feel what she was becoming. The White Luna spirit was consuming her humanity faster than expected. Kyle grabbed her face carefully between both hands. "Stay with me." Lyra's silver eyes softened painfully. "I'm trying." The words nearly destroyed him. Around them, the army stood frozen. No one cared about kingdoms anymore. No one cared about conquest, because the White Luna was dying to save the very prince they feared she would destroy. Aeron stepped forward slowly through the snow. The Southern King looked shaken to his core. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he understood the true horror of prophecy, that the people trapped inside it suffered far more than the kingdom surrounding them. He lowered himself slowly to one knee, not to Lyra's power, to her sacrifice. On everyone, the other rulers followed. Kings, alphas, war commanders, all kneeling silently beneath the storm. The White Luna had united the North exactly as prophecy promised. Not through conquest, through love powerful enough to terrify everyone who witnessed it. Chaol barely noticed. His entire world had narrowed to the woman trembling in his arms. "Look at me," he whispered desperately. Lyra tried. Gods, she tried. But the world sounded far away now. The white wolf spirit called to her gently from somewhere beyond the snow and moonlight. Peace. Rest. Ancient forests beneath silver skies. It would be so easy to let go. Then Chaol's hand tightened against hers, and suddenly she felt him breaking apart through the bond. Not physically, emotionally. The terrifying Prince of Winterfang looked shattered. "I spent my whole life surviving," he whispered hoarsely. "Then I met you, and finally wanted more than survival." Tears burned down Lyra's face. Chaol pressed his forehead against hers desperately. "So don't you dare leave me here, after teaching me how to love you." The rawness of the confession tore through her fading consciousness, because Chaol did not know how to beg gracefully. Every plea sounded dragged from somewhere deep and wounded inside him. Lyra lifted trembling fingers weakly to his face. "You love me?" The prince almost laughed through the tears in his voice. "You impossible woman." His breath shook. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you kneeling beside that wounded wolf, while every noble in the courtyard looked away." Lyra stared at him silently. "You looked lonely," he whispered. The words shattered the last walls around her heart. Not beautiful, not powerful, lonely. He had seen her. Even then, even before the prophecy, even before the moonfire, the bond between them surged violently. The white wolf spirit stirred again. Not demanding, listening, choice, always choice. And suddenly, Lyra understood something the old moon queens never had. The White Luna was never meant to abandon love for power. That was the lie fear created. Slowly, carefully, Lyra turned inward toward the ancient spirit, sharing her soul. "I choose both," she whispered. Moonlight exploded across the battlefield one final time. The white wolf appeared behind her fully again, enormous and radiant beneath the storm-dark sky. Then, slowly, the spirit bowed its head, not consuming her, accepting her choice. The silver cracks beneath Lyra's eyes faded. Warmth returned painfully to her skin. Chaol stared at her in stunned disbelief. The dragon laughed softly. There she is. The White Luna had done what none before her achieved. She remained human, not because her power was weaker, because her love anchored her to the world. Lyra sagged forward from exhaustion. Chaol caught her instantly, arms wrapping around her tightly enough to feel almost desperate. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Snow fell softly around the silent battlefield. Then finally, Chaol buried his face briefly against her hair and whispered the words the entire kingdom had waited to hear. "My queen." Lyra closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, the title did not feel like a cage. It felt like home.